Racist police officer blocks black veteran from entering California bar. And what happens? 5 minutes later, we'll leave you totally speechless. On a quiet Friday night, in a sun-faded California town where everyone thinks they know everyone, a simple moment at the door of a bar would trigger a national reckoning. No raised voices, no fists thrown, just one man, calm, silent, steady, and a text that would summon a brotherhood stronger than any badge or bias. Tyrese "Ghost" Jenkins wasn't looking for trouble. After years of service in places the average American couldn't even pronounce, he just wanted a cold beer, maybe a jukebox playing some Al Green, a few hours to feel like a regular man, not a warrior or a symbol. But that peace shattered when a smirking off-duty cop leaned in and said, "This ain't your kind of place." What happened next didn't just silence a bar, it echoed across the country. Because Ghost wasn't alone. He never had been. 5 minutes, 10 Navy SEALs. No shouting, no threats, just presence. Quiet, powerful presence that made every head in that bar turn and every heart beat a little faster. What began as an act of discrimination would become a story about loyalty, honor, and the kind of justice you don't need a badge to deliver. This is the story of what really happened that night and how one man's dignity sparked a movement across America. Before continuing, I need to make an appeal, and if you are truly patriotic or represent your nation, allow yourself to subscribe to this channel now so you can receive more videos of military men turning things around. Tyrese. Jenkins had the kind of presence that made people pause, not out of fear but respect. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a posture straight enough to shame a Marine parade line, he walked like someone who had seen the worst of the world and still chose peace. Most people in town didn't know his story, but that never bothered him. Ghost never needed to talk about where he'd been. His scars spoke loud enough. He lived modestly on the edge of town, in a rented duplex with paint peeling off the porch rails. No fancy car, no medals hanging in his living room. Just a few pictures in a shoebox. Teammates, deserts, jungles, and a folded flag from a friend who didn't make it home. That was the only decoration in his small living room. By day, Ghost worked at an auto body shop, not because he had to, but because he liked working with his hands, fixing things, making them whole again. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. His boss, a white guy named Lou with a beer gut and a heart of gold, often joked, "Tyrese is the only man I know who could whisper and still make a room go quiet." But there was one thing even Lou didn't know. Tyrese wasn't just a veteran, he was a Navy SEAL. Not just any SEAL either. He was a ghost. That was the nickname his team gave him because he could get in and out of danger without leaving. A trace. He'd done missions the government would never confirm, carried out rescues no one would hear about, and while others got out for fame or fortune, Ty stayed in for his brothers, for the ones next to him in the dark. Now, out of uniform, he didn't need attention. He wanted quiet, he wanted healing. But even more than that, he wanted to be treated like anyone else, no more, no less. So when he decided to grab a drink that Friday night, wearing nothing but jeans and a hoodie, it wasn't to make a statement. It was to blend in, to breathe. But sometimes, even your quietest moments can call down a storm. The sign out front, Red Rick's Tavern, glowing in tired neon like a promise half kept. It wasn't fancy, but it had cold beer, decent music, and a crowd that leaned local. Mostly factory guys, retirees, and off-duty officers, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business and preferred it that way. Tyrese pulled up just after 8 p.m. The sun had dipped behind the hills, but the heat still hung in the air like sweat on skin. He parked his old Ford pickup, killed the engine, and sat for a moment letting the song on the radio finish. A change is gonna come. It made him smile. As he approached the bar's entrance, the sound of laughter spilled out onto the street. He reached for the door. That's when he heard it. "Hold up," a voice said. Tyrese looked to his right. A white guy, mid-40s, stood leaning against the wall by the door, nursing a bottle of beer. His shirt had a sheriff's badge printed on the sleeve, the kind off-duty cops wear when they want you to know they're cops. "This ain't your kind of place," the man said flatly, eyes squinting like he was sizing Tyrese up for a mugshot. Tyrese blinked, calm, collected. "Excuse me?" The man took a step forward. "I said, this ain't your kind of place. Try somewhere else." Tyrese glanced inside. The crowd was mixed, but mostly white, country music playing, pool balls clacking. He raised an eyebrow. "It's a bar, right? I'm just here for a drink." The man didn't budge. "Sure, but we don't need any trouble tonight." Tyrese exhaled slowly. "And what makes you think I'm trouble?" The man smirked, took a swig. The hoodie, the look. "Come on, man, you know how it is." Tyrese studied him. No anger in his eyes, just disappointment, like he'd seen this movie before. "I served this country," Tyrese said softly. "I've got every right to be here." The man chuckled, cruel and careless. "Yeah, prove it." Silence stretched between them like barbed wire. For a moment, Tyrese considered saying more, but he didn't. Instead, he stepped back, pulled out his phone, and typed a message. One text. No drama. Then he leaned against the brick wall beside the bar's window and waited, hands in pockets, face unreadable. The man scoffed and walked inside. Tyrese didn't move. He'd seen worse. But he also knew this wouldn't end how that man thought it would, because brothers don't. Let brothers stand alone. Inside Rick's tavern, the music played on, conversations buzzed, and no one thought twice about the cop by the door. He was a regular. Folks called him Murph. Everyone knew he liked to puff his chest, especially after a few drinks. He wasn't bad, just a little too proud of his badge, a little too comfortable in his corner of the world. But outside, Tyrese stood still, as calm as the sea before a storm. People passed by, some looked. No one said anything. To them, he was just another guy checking his phone. But in truth, he wasn't scrolling or stalling. He was waiting for family. Tyrese had never needed to prove himself with noise. He believed a man's actions spoke louder than any boast. That was something the teams had taught him. When things went sideways overseas, you didn't yell, you didn't panic. You moved with purpose, you stood your ground. And if you were lucky, you weren't standing alone. Back in the bar, Murph was telling his version of the encounter. "Some dude out there thought he was tough stuff," he laughed. "Tried to walk in here like he owned the place. Didn't say who he was, just mumbled something about the military. Probably a line." A few people laughed nervously. Others exchanged glances. No one wanted a scene. This was supposed to be their quiet night. Meanwhile, Tyrese didn't flinch. He leaned against the wall and breathed. 3 minutes passed, then 4. Then, at exactly the 5-minute mark, headlights swept across the lot. One by one, vehicles pulled in. Black SUVs, a beat-up Camaro, a matte grey pickup that had seen better days. Doors opened, boots hit pavement. 10 men approached the entrance in silence. All black, all dressed casual. Jeans, hoodies, ball caps. Nothing flashy, but there was something unmistakable in the way they moved. Precision, confidence, brotherhood. They weren't just friends. They were SEALs. One by one, they walked past Tyrese, nodding to him with respect. Each wore a ring. Subtle, silver, embedded with a trident. The kind of thing you'd miss unless you knew what to look for. Murph looked up from the bar as the door opened again. The music seemed to lower itself instinctively, as if even the jukebox knew what was happening. The tallest of the SEALs walked up to Tyrese, clapped his shoulder, and said, quietly, "You good?" Tyrese nodded once. That's when another stepped forward, calm and steady, and looked Murph straight in the eye. "He fought for your freedom," he said. "What have you done lately?" The words weren't loud, but they hit like a hammer dropped in a silent room. The bar went quiet. The words hung in the air like smoke. "He fought for your freedom. What have you done lately?" Murph blinked, suddenly aware of the weight in the room. These men didn't posture. They didn't have to. There was something about them, the way they stood, the quiet discipline in their eyes, that said more than any uniform ever could. People inside the bar started murmuring. A woman near the jukebox whispered to her husband, "Aren't those military rings?" Another guy near the pool table leaned in. "That one. I think I saw him on a news segment. That's real deal. Navy SEAL stuff." Murph's face shifted. The confidence he'd worn like a second skin started to peel. "I didn't know who he was," he muttered, trying to explain, eyes darting toward Tyrese. He didn't say. Tyrese finally stepped forward, just enough to be seen clearly under the dim bar lights. He didn't look angry, just disappointed. I shouldn't have to explain who I am to walk through a door, he said. Calm, controlled, but it cut deep. One of the bartenders, a young Latino kid named Ricky, came around the counter and approached. Sir, are you really a SEAL? Tyrese nodded once. No pride, just truth. Tyrese Ghost Jenkins, one of the men beside him added. Silver Star, Bronze Star, 5 combat deployments. He's the reason some of us are standing here. Someone gasped near the bar. Another SEAL pulled out his phone and opened a web page, a small write-up from a military site showing Ghost's commendations. He held it up. The screen glowed with Tyrese's name beside a black and white photo in uniform, clean-shaven, stern-eyed, proud. A woman sitting near the bar placed a hand over her mouth. Oh my God, I've seen that face. He was on that piece about Fallujah, wasn't he? Tyrese just stood there, uncomfortable with the attention but not shying away. He wasn't here for praise. He wasn't here for revenge. He was here to make a point, not just for himself but for every man who's ever been judged by his skin before his soul. Murph swallowed hard. His grip on his beer faltered. I didn't mean, he started, but the words fell apart before they could form a sentence that meant anything. You didn't ask, Tyrese said, locking eyes with him. And that's the problem. More people had gathered near the entrance now. Phones were recording, not in a viral, hungry way, but in that instinct people have when they realize they're witnessing a moment that matters. Not violence, not rage, just truth. 10 warriors standing beside their brother, and one town suddenly confronted with its reflection. By the time the SEALs had ordered their drinks, quietly, respectfully, like any other patrons, the first video had already hit social media. A teenager near the back had filmed everything from the moment the 10 men entered to the line that echoed like gospel. He fought for your freedom. What have you done lately? Within 20 minutes, the clip had 5,000 views. Within the hour, it hit 100,000. By the next morning, it was all over the news. Local channels called it the Ghost Incident. National outlets followed suit. Words like racial profiling, veteran mistreatment, and quiet. Justice flooded headlines. But what caught people more than any headline was the tone of the footage. Calm, restrained, powerful. There were no fists thrown, no yelling, no one dragged away in cuffs. Just truth standing on its own legs. Tyrese went home that night without saying much. He wasn't on social media, didn't check the tags. But the texts started rolling in from old teammates. You made us proud tonight, Ghost. That clip is going viral, man. About time people saw what kind of man you really are. The next day, things in town felt different. Rick's Tavern issued a public apology online. The bar's owner, Rick Dawson, even showed up at Tyrese's garage the next morning, hat in hand, face red with shame. I didn't know, he said. Murph's not even supposed to be watching the door. He'd had a few. That's not how we treat folks. Tyrese didn't raise his voice. He didn't lecture. Just nodded and got back to work replacing a carburetor. Later that afternoon, a group of kids came by the shop. They were from the local high school's ROTC program. One of them handed Tyrese a drawing. It was him standing beside the SEALs, the words "Respect is earned" scrawled across the top. Tyrese smiled, and for a second, the hardness in his face cracked. That evening, someone started a hashtag, #StandWithGhost. Within hours, it trended nationwide. TV interviews started calling. Podcasts. Veteran organizations reached out. Some offered money, others endorsements. A military news magazine even offered to do a profile titled "The SEAL Who Spoke Without." Shouting. But Ghost wasn't interested in fame. He didn't want to be a headline. What mattered to him wasn't going viral. It was being seen, being acknowledged as a human being, as a man. Still, with all the attention came a price. He couldn't walk into a grocery store without people staring. Some applauded him, others seemed uncomfortable. Not everyone likes having their mirror held up to their face. And Murph, he was placed on administrative leave by the sheriff's department pending investigation. No one celebrated that, not even Tyrese. because this wasn't about revenge. It was about change. And change had finally begun. It was 2 days later when the knock came at Tyrese's door. He'd just finished washing the oil off his hands after another long shift at the shop. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting a golden light through his screen door. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened it, they were there. Not all 10 this time, just 4 of them. Still wearing jeans, hoodies, and the same calm energy that had silenced a bar 2 nights ago. The one in front, Darnell, the team's unofficial spokesman, gave a nod. "You good, Ghost?" he asked. Tyrese smirked. "Y'all don't text no more?" Darnell grinned. "Had to do this one in person." They stepped inside. No small talk, no catching up. Just a silence among men who'd seen the same dirt, bled the same blood, and understood each other in ways civilians never could. "We talked," Darnell finally said. "The whole team." Tyrese nodded, sensing the seriousness before the words even came. "You've always had our back," another one, Marcus, added. "Time we had yours in a different way." Tyrese raised an eyebrow. Darnell reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out an envelope. A non-profit, veteran-owned, black-led, starting chapters all over the country, safe spaces, job mentorships, conflict resolution training. "We've been talking about it for a while, but after what happened at Rick's, when we think it's time to put this thing in motion." Tyrese opened the envelope. Inside was a basic proposal, a plan to build something real, structured, with funding, already pledged from veteran networks. "We want you to lead the West Coast chapter," Darnell said. "You're already the face of something, whether you like it or not. Might as well use it." Tyrese stared at the papers. The words swam for a moment in his mind, competing with doubt. He wasn't a leader in the traditional sense. He didn't like cameras, didn't like crowds. But this wasn't about flash. It was about purpose. Still, he hesitated. "I didn't sign up for this," he said quietly. Marcus leaned forward. Neither did Rosa Parks. The room fell. Quiet. "You think we came back here just to drink a beer and vanish?" Darnell added. "Nah, man, this ain't about going viral. This is about legacy." Tyrese sat down, running a hand over his face. He thought about his dad, a Vietnam vet who came back to nothing. No welcome, no honor, just silence. He thought about the kids who came by the shop, the look in their eyes. He thought about the moment Murph said, "Prove it." Maybe this was the proof the world needed, not through noise, but through building something that lasted. He looked up at his brothers. "You sure you want me out front?" he asked. Darnell smiled. "Ain't nobody else we trust more." Tyrese nodded slowly, then stood. "All right," he said. "Let's build something that can't be ignored." That night, Tyrese didn't sleep much. He sat on his front porch long after the sun went down, the quiet of the California countryside wrapping around him like a blanket. The stars above were sharp and clear, and the only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the chirping of crickets. He'd faced harder choices before, life or death ones. Missions where one wrong move meant a teammate wouldn't make it home, but this felt heavier in a different way, because this choice wasn't about survival. It was about purpose. If he said yes, everything would change. No more slipping under the radar, no more simple days at the garage. He'd be a public figure, something he'd never wanted to be. Cameras, interviews, expectations. That wasn't his style. But if he said no, what message would that send? He thought about the veterans who'd texted him, the young ROTC kids who looked at him like a symbol of something better. He thought about the moment Murph stood in his way, and how many others across the country faced worse, without anyone filming it. Maybe that was the point. He'd been a ghost long enough. Now maybe it was time to be seen. The next morning, he drove to the edge of town, to a local community center that had closed down 2 years ago due to lack of funding. Paint was chipped, windows dusty, but the bones were solid. He walked the perimeter slowly, mentally sketching what it could be. Mentorship rooms, training sessions, a quiet place where veterans could sit without judgment, where young men could learn what respect really looked like. By the time he circled back to the truck, his phone buzzed. "Darnell." "Well?" Tyrese looked up at the building, then out toward the hills. "Yeah," he said, "let's get to work." That same day, he signed the papers. A new non-profit chapter was officially born, Ghost Ops Initiative. Its mission was simple: build bridges, restore dignity, and train the next generation of warriors for peace, not just combat. Within a week, donations started coming in. Within a month, volunteers were painting the community center. Within 6 weeks, the first classes had begun: conflict de-escalation, job skills, veteran support therapy. And Tyrese, he showed up every morning. First one in, last one out. Still in jeans and a hoodie, still calm, still quiet. But now he wasn't hiding in the shadows of his past. He was using it to light the path forward. The grand opening of the Ghost Ops Initiative Center wasn't flashy. No balloons, no podiums, no parade, just people. Veterans, high schoolers, single mums, retired teachers, all gathered in folding chairs under a pop-up tent in the parking lot, drinking lemonade, eating grilled hot dogs, and looking at the newly repainted building like it was a second chance. Tyrese stood near the side, hands in his pockets, letting Darnell do most of the talking. But when he finally stepped up to say a few words, everyone got quiet. He didn't give a speech. He just looked out at the crowd and said, "I didn't open this place for attention. I opened it so nobody here ever has to prove their worth just to walk through a door." That was it. And somehow, it said everything. In the weeks that followed, the center became more than a program. It became a movement. Local businesses donated supplies. Churches sent volunteers. Veterans from other towns started driving in just to be part of something that felt real. Kids who'd been teetering on the edge, flirting with gangs, skipping school, now showed up for weekly mentorship sessions with Tyrese and the SEAL team. They called him Coach Ghost. He never told them what he'd done overseas, but they knew somehow that this was a man who'd been through fire and came back without bitterness. The walls inside the center were simple. One side had a mural, not of soldiers or guns, but of hands shaking across color lines, ages, uniforms. In the corner hung a framed quote, "Respect isn't something you demand, it's something you show." One afternoon, Rick Dawson, the bar owner, stopped by. He stood awkwardly at the door, holding a box of donuts and a handwritten note. He handed it to Tyrese. "You've done more good for this town in 2 months than most of us have in years." Tyrese nodded and took the box. "Glad you came, Rick." Rick looked down. Murph's still suspended. "Don't know if he'll be back." Tyrese paused. "He ever reach out?" Rick shook his head. "Not yet." Tyrese didn't say much else, but when Rick turned to leave, he called out, "He's welcome to stop by." Doors open. Rick looked back, surprised. That's who Tyrese was. No grudges, no bitterness, only growth. And as word spread about the Ghost Ops Initiative, similar programs started popping up. Seattle, Atlanta, Chicago, all led by veterans who'd felt unseen for too long, now stepping into the light. Tyrese didn't seek credit, but he couldn't walk into a store anymore without someone stopping to thank him. Most days he just nodded and kept it moving. Still, there was something different in his eyes now. Not tiredness, but peace. He was no longer just surviving, he was building. It was a chilly Saturday morning in November when Tyrese got the envelope in the mail. No return address, just a crisp ivory card sealed with a gold emblem. Inside was a simple message: "You are cordially invited to the State Civic Leadership Award ceremony. You have been selected as this year's honoree for public service and community healing, Office of the Governor, California." Tyrese almost tossed it aside. That kind of spotlight made him itch. But Darnell spotted the envelope later that day and grinned when he read it. "Man, you have to go," he said. "This ain't about you, it's about what you started." Tyrese didn't respond at first, just looked down at the invitation, then out the window where a group of local kids were painting a community mural beside the center. He nodded. "All right, but no tux." When the day came, he wore the same dark button-down he wore to funerals. Simple, clean. His seal ring glinted under the sunlight as he walked into the state capitol auditorium. The ceremony was packed. Lawmakers, activists, students, veterans, families. The governor himself stood at the podium and told the story of the ghost from California, how one man's quiet strength turned a moment of injustice into a movement of purpose. They showed the video, the one from Rick's Tavern. The crowd fell silent at the line. "He fought for your freedom. What have you done lately?" When Tyrese walked on stage to accept the plaque, the applause was thunderous. He took it, in quietly. No fist pumps, no big speech, just a nod. When the governor asked if he'd like to say something, Tyrese took the mic for maybe 10 seconds. "I didn't open that center to get thanked. I opened it because I was tired of watching. People like me get ignored. This ain't about me, it's about all of us." Then he stepped back and the applause got even louder. Afterward, reporters swarmed. Tyrese answered a few questions but didn't linger. It wasn't about press, it was about what came next. Back home, the town of Rockfield honored him in their own way. The mayor declared the third Friday of every October Tyrese Jenkins Day, a day dedicated to community service, unity, and veteran support. A mural of Tyrese went up downtown, not in uniform, not with a rifle, but in jeans and a hoodie, arms crossed, standing in front of the Ghost Ops Center. Behind him, 10 shadowy silhouettes, his SEAL brothers, stood in tribute. Murph didn't show up to the unveiling, but he did send a letter. It simply read, "I was wrong. I'm sorry. Thank you for showing me a better way." Tyrese folded the letter and tucked it into his wallet. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was the final form of strength. 3 months after the award ceremony, life settled into a new rhythm. The Ghost Ops initiative was thriving. New programs were launching. Partnerships with nearby school districts brought in young men from tough neighborhoods. Veterans who once felt invisible were now leading workshops, mentoring teens and finding their footing again. Tyrese liked the work. It gave his days meaning and his nights rest. But one morning in late January, something unexpected appeared in his mailbox. A letter, handwritten, no return address. The penmanship was neat, practiced, like someone used to writing with intention. He opened it and read, "Dear Mr. Jenkins, you don't know me, but I know you. My name is Connor Murphy. I'm Officer Murph's son. I watched that video a dozen times. I heard what my dad said to you. I also heard what you didn't say in return. I used to think being strong meant acting like my dad, but now I think being strong looks a lot more like you. I want to be better. I want to understand. If your center allows visitors like me, I'd like to volunteer, even if it's just cleaning bathrooms. Sincerely, Connor Murphy." Tyrese stared at the paper. The name hit him harder than any award ever had. He folded the letter and placed it on his kitchen table. Later that day, he handed it to Darnell without saying a word. Darnell read it, then looked up, surprised. "You gonna let him in?" Tyrese shrugged, a small smile tugging at his mouth. Doors open. 2 days later, Connor showed up. He was 19, wiry, nervous, wearing a hoodie with his hands buried deep in the front pocket, eyes glued to the pavement like he wasn't sure if he should really be there. Tyrese met him outside the building. "You're early," he said. Connor nodded. "I didn't want to be late." Tyrese tossed him a broom. "Good, we've got work to do." They didn't talk about the past, not at first. But over the next few weeks, Connor kept coming back, sweeping floors, painting walls, listening, learning. And one afternoon, during a session on de-escalation, he raised his hand and said, "My dad used to think yelling made people respect you. But I think maybe respect starts with how you see people, not how loud you are." The room went quiet. Tyrese watched from the back, arms crossed, a quiet nod of approval on his face. The story had started at a bar door closed in judgment. Now it continued through the son of the man who'd tried to keep that door shut, slowly, quietly, helping to open new ones. It wasn't justice in the traditional sense. It was better. It was healing. A full year passed since that night, outside Rick's Tavern. To most people, it felt like a lifetime ago, a viral moment, part of the constant scroll of online stories. But for Tyrese "Ghost" Jenkins, it was a quiet reminder of how a single night can reroute the direction of an entire life. The bar was still open. Murph had quietly resigned months ago. No scandal, no drama, just a quiet exit, and a small donation made anonymously to the Ghost Ops initiative not long after. Tyrese never mentioned it. He didn't need to. The center had become a second home, not just for him, but for dozens of others. Veterans dropped by for coffee and quiet. Teens used it as a safe after-school space. Single moms brought their sons to mentorship nights. The walls were now covered in photos, not of war but of progress. Smiling kids, men hugging each other after long talks, graduation, caps, job contracts. What had started as one act of prejudice had become a platform for healing. Tyrese's personal life had changed too. He'd reconnected with his sister in Oakland, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Turns out, she'd seen the video and cried. Their reunion over dinner was the first time they'd been in the same room since their mother passed. Now they talked every Sunday. He still worked part-time at the garage, though Lou always tried to pay him more. Then he'd accept. "You're the only man who can fix an engine and a broken spirit in the same hour," Lou joked one morning. Tyrese laughed, shook his head, and wiped his hands on a rag. Just trying to keep things running. He still wore the same hoodie. Still kept his phone silent most of the day. But now when he walked through town, people didn't look through him. They looked to him. Not as a symbol, not as a viral moment, but as a neighbor, a leader. A man who never asked for attention, but used it when it came. And yet, if you asked him what changed most over the past year, he'd say this: "I stopped trying to disappear." Because for the first time in a long time, Tyrese didn't feel like a ghost. He felt seen. Not for his medals, not for his muscles, not even for his moment at the bar, but for his heart. And that changed everything. Tyrese never planned to be a voice for anything. He didn't grow up marching or giving speeches. He wasn't raised to demand attention. He was taught to work hard, say thank you, and let his actions speak for themselves. But sometimes the world doesn't give you a choice. Sometimes you're forced into the light, not to make noise, but to show people what it looks like. To stand tall without shouting, to fight without fists, to win without anyone else losing. Ghost's story wasn't about one bar or one cop. It was about all the quiet moments people carry, the hurt they swallow, the doors they're told they don't belong behind, the stares they pretend not to notice. It was about what happens when someone finally says, "Enough." And even more than that, it was about what comes after, when the rage settles, when the cameras leave and the real work begins. Because healing doesn't come in headlines, it comes in small acts. An apology letter from a cop's son, a job application handed to a struggling veteran, a young black teen shaking the hand of a man who looks like him and realizing, "I can be more than what the world expects." Tyrese never wanted to be a hero. He just wanted peace. But the thing about peace is, it's not something you find. It's something you build, one choice at a time. And if there's anything his journey proved, it's that change doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes it looks like 10 men walking quietly into a bar, standing beside a brother, and letting the world see what honor truly means. Sometimes it looks like holding the door open, even for the ones who once tried to close it on you. Sometimes it looks like a ghost stepping into the light. The sun was setting over Rockfield when Tyrese stood alone outside the community center, locking up for the night. The mural on the building glowed in the amber light. Him, standing in front of the doors, arms crossed, 10 shadows behind him. Below it, someone had painted new words in bold script: "Where dignity enters, division ends." He ran a hand across the fresh paint, the brushstroke still faintly textured under his fingertips. Behind him, the town had changed, not in some perfect utopian way, but in the ways that matter. There were still disagreements, still mistakes, but now people paused, they listened, they thought twice before judging. And more than anything, they saw each other. Tyrese didn't talk much about that night anymore. If someone brought it up, he'd smile politely, nod, and steer the conversation back to what mattered: the kids, the veterans, the future. To him, the moment at Rick's Tavern wasn't the climax. It was the catalyst, the spark. The start of something better than a viral clip or a trending hashtag. It was the beginning of a legacy. And as he slid the keys into his hoodie pocket and walked toward his truck, He paused. Across the street, a young boy, maybe 11, stood with his backpack slung low and eyes wide. "You that guy from the video?" the kid asked. Tyrese smiled. "I'm just the guy who opens the building." The boy took a step closer. "You think someone like me could be a SEAL?" Tyrese looked him up and down, thin, quiet, watchful. "You already got what it takes," he said. "You just don't know it yet." The boy grinned, turned, and ran down the street toward home. Tyrese watched him go, heart full but still steady. Another door opened. Another future changed. Not through anger, not through power, but through presence. Stories like Tyrese's aren't just meant to be watched or shared. They're meant to be felt. Because somewhere in America, someone else is standing at a doorway, wondering if they belong. Somewhere a veteran's walking through a store unnoticed. Somewhere a young man's trying to figure out what strength really looks like. And maybe, just maybe, someone's about to make a choice. To push someone out, or to let them in. The world doesn't always change with noise. Sometimes it starts with a moment of silence, followed by a single step forward. So ask yourself, what would you have done if you were standing outside that bar? What would you do if someone like Tyrese "Ghost" Jenkins stood in front of you, not asking for anything, just existing in his truth? Drop your thoughts below. Have you ever witnessed quiet strength change a room? Have you ever had to prove yourself when you shouldn't have had to? Your voice matters. Your story might be the next one someone needs to hear. And if this story moved you, don't just scroll, share it, because someone out there needs to know they're not alone.